Welcome to Working Through Games, where we take a look at the people behind the games we play. What they do, how they do it, and what we can learn from their journey. On today's episode, we look at Harry Critchley, a professional music composer and sound designer based in the UK.
Well, hello. We've chatted to each other by email, but this is the first time we've actually got to talk to each other. So it's nice to meet you.
And you too.
Tell me just a nice, short, concise history of Harry Critchley.
The Reddit question.
Yes, I know.
So started off playing the drums. Really loved that. And then when I got into high school, I was introduced to digital audio workstations and keyboards and MIDI. I was fascinated. I was hooked straight away. And I started making just quite basic electronic music, which at the time I thought was incredible. That kind of progressed and I didn't really stick to genres, and I started adding more cinematic elements to these electronic pieces. And one of them got heard by a developer who got in contact with me and said, I really like the style of this piece. Would you be open to maybe composing for a game? And I said, well, why not? Let's see where it goes. From then on, my love bigger, more cinematic scores has really evolved, and I've been lucky enough to work on some really good projects and got a few more that are coming in, which are fantastic. It just snowballed from a passion, which has now luckily somehow become a livelihood.
What was your music-related education? What formal qualifications did you get?
So I did GCSE music technology. That was my first kind of interest. And then I did the same at A-level. And then after that, I went to a university where I studied music composition, went through that, had a really good time. And then smaller qualifications, like I've got the Pro Tools qualification and stuff like that. But no, that's it really.
Okay, that's handy. Probably having those side qualifications is useful.
Yeah, I do want to do the one in Ableton, but I just don't. I do have the time. I tell myself I don't, but I spend my time doing music. So
you just got to make time. That's all it is, isn't it? Really, you have to.
I know.
Commit to
priorities,
slicing up another little chunk of your day, you know.
Exactly.
One of the reasons I started doing this is because I've just started streaming regularly on Twitch, and I was looking for decent games to play, but you know, I didn't just want it to be a kind of games playing factory where I'd play a game then move on to the next. What I want to do is like play through a game, then talk to some of the people involved in the project of that game to give a bit more understanding and a bit more backstory to the game that I've just finished, you know, and give people that are interested in that game a bit more understanding. And the game that I played through was Cloudpunk.
I hate this city. I'm about to meet the most feared criminal in this city, and I have to watch what I say.
Do me a favor, Ronnie. Don't talk to me about Cora anymore.
Will you be able to wake up tomorrow and do all of this again?
So tell me a little bit about the journey that got you to doing Cloudpunk.
So the developer that picked me up initially, a guy called Roma, he was developing a game called Darkness Anomaly, which I started doing scoring for. He passed over my details to Marco, who's the lead developer and head of Ironlands, the studio that made Cloudpunk. And we started talking a little bit. He said, yeah, he really liked the stuff that I was doing with Roma, the Darkness Anomaly score, but what he wants is Synthwave, Cyberpunk, that kind of stuff. And I said, all right, I'll give it a shot. Composed a 1-minute sample theme, and instantly we just thought, yeah, this works really well for the aesthetics of the game, what we want. And yeah, the rest is history. So now I work for them. Basically, I suppose I am their employee now. When there's a new game proposed by the studio, they'll send me the script. I'll read the whole thing, get a idea for the world. I'll talk to the writer, Thomas, and we'll throw about ideas as well. And then I'll start seeing the first pieces of concept art, and that's really when I get a sense of what this world is going to look like, what the color schemes are going to be, how it flows. And then I'll start, as I said, with main themes or ambient themes. I'll probably do a selection of each, and then I'll send them over to Marco, and he'll give them a listen. He'll say, right, that's a good one, that'll fit, that won't. And then I'll have like a narrowed down version. And then from there, it's quite easy for me to see how to progress in the world. When it comes to the level themes, what will tend to happen is either one or two things. I'll get a short video of what's going on, like completely silent, and I'll compose something simple to it, send it back over. they like it, then I'll just work on the audio, make it a full theme. Or he'll tell me exactly what's going on, how long the sequence will last, and then I'll build a theme around it. And then sometimes they build the scene around the music, but it's about 50-50 which way we go about it.
One of the things that strikes me about scoring for games is the sheer volume of material, as opposed to like a film or a TV score. It seems like there's a lot more that gets composed basically for games. Can you tell me something about the differences that you found in gigs that you've had between those kind of projects?
Yeah, so I've done a couple short films. They tend to work off cues, so that the music in it will only be, say, between 10 seconds or a minute, maybe tops. So by the end of it, you've got a full score, but unless it's a big blockbuster, those little cues don't get turned into full pieces. In that respect, it was much easier, a quicker, faster, more streamlined process. Whereas in the game, so we'll talk about Cloudpunk, for example, you've got to create the main theme, which instantly does the first thing you hear, so it's got to be catching. Then there's a ton of in-game ambient themes. And the way that this game's structured is you've got levels of the city. So I'll have to do a bunch of themes for the top level, middle level, bottom level, all the way down to the vents, all with their own style and unique character, and areas like Chinatown and everything in the game. And then you've got themes that will need to be played in missions, at pivotal points, just like the cues in a film. But because it'll go from a cutscene to the player then playing, these themes have to be much longer and have to play out for hopefully the duration of how long ever it takes the player to solve the problem. And then other themes such as driving themes and then idle themes is where the player's just left the computer and you just want something to fill that ambient space. And then you've got in-world audio as well, so audio that will be played outside bars or jukeboxes, all that kind of stuff that has to be done and thought about. And then if there's bands in the world, you've got to create little songs for them. And then on top of all that, you've got the sound design. When I was doing the Cloudpunk sound design, I'd always reference it to the main menu theme, so I'd play the sounds over it just to make sure nothing stands out as sharp or unnatural for that world, which does take a while, but it's worth it, the end product, so it doesn't sound unnatural, basically.
So that brings up an interesting element, because you're a sound designer as well as a games composer. Is that common in the games industry? Do composers often go into the sound design, or is it two separate people that usually do that? Because I guess it's good to have it all in one package, the same person doing both. But is that common?
It's becoming more common especially in independent games. Very rarely would you get it on a AAA title. You'd have specific people for specific roles. But no, I myself do always try and go in with both sound design and music, because I feel like if the same person does it, it's the same ear creating it, so it makes it more natural. And obviously it saves the studio on hiring more people, which is always a plus. I have seen more people coming into it as sound designers who say they'll do composition, or composers who say they'll do sound design. If you're a composer, you tend to say you'll do sound design, but if you're a sound designer, it's quite rare to say you'll also do composition. That makes sense.
But sound design for a composer is more of an addition to their skill set, but composing for a sound designer is kind of like two different worlds, really.
Yeah, sound design is a massive talent within itself, but it's more technical, I suppose, than composition is. You've got to see a silent scene and instantly know, right, that needs to go there, that needs that needs, and then somehow manage to blend them all together. So your brain is tricked into thinking, oh, it's a real place. But no, I love doing both of them. I think they're both an interesting process. So I always go in and offer, I'll do both sound design and composition.
Novalis has been announced and discussed. Are they hiring you for Novalis as well?
So choose carefully. There's a city you see when you close your eyes. It's called Novalis. Consider this your invitation.
Yeah, so I've already done quite a few themes for Novalis, where at the moment we're working on getting a main theme, which is going to be quite different to the City of Ghosts and Cloudpunk ones. Can't tell you how, but we're going in a slightly different direction with it.
Okay.
It's been a bit of a learning curve because it's a slightly different style of composition that I'm used to. But again, it's pushing me to greater my skill set. So it's something that I was quite happy to do. And I think we've nailed it. We're very close anyway. It's in the final stages of editing. After that, going to be ambient themes for specific parts of the world. I'm just thinking what I can and can't say.
Okay, yeah, no, you can be as vague as you need to. I mean, from the little that I've read, it sounds like Novalis is going to be different from Cloudpunk and City and Ghosts. It sounds like a less kind of scripted, plot-driven and more open-ended resource management almost kind of thing, like Sims.
Yeah, it's more of one of those games. It's less story-driven, but there is still a few stories to explore in the world. It does have characters and things to do, people to make relationships with, and explore the world a bit more.
Very nice.
I have recently listened back to the City of Ghosts score as well, which I hadn't done since it was released. And again, I've been doing the same thing. I can see where I've improved, how it's changed slightly, especially for this specific Novalis game. The general feel of the score feels quite different to both Cloudpunk and A City of Ghosts.
And the turnaround between the two games is pretty brief for an indie studio. Like a 1 year between chapters and it wasn't like a 1 hour, 2 hour playthrough. It's another almost comparable length to the first game.
Yeah, exactly. It was quite hectic at times, but we just decided while there's this hype around the original Cloudpunk, we might as well get this one out. We didn't want to rush it, but we did do a lot of checks to make sure it was all okay, and we were quite happy with the finished version, definitely. So I'm quite pleased that this Novalis is more of a larger time frame, as it just allows me to explore more ideas with the music and sound.
This is where we're headed. To the sky. Beyond the clouds.
Let's dive into a little more of the technical aspects about what you use, how you make the music, and again, we'll use Cloudpunk as the example. So a few quick questions. What's your DAW of choice?
Ableton.
Okay, and is this something you used from the beginning, or did it change over time?
I started with Cubase, as that was what they had in school, and then at home I downloaded FL Studio. This was about 10 years ago now. Then I switched to Reason, because I was quite interested in how they've integrated the synths in there and you can patch them all together. And I played with that for a little bit. Quite liked it, but I didn't feel it was as in-depth as Cubase or even FL Studio. Then, instead of going back to them, I then switched to Logic. I thought, okay, let's give this a try.
Wow, you've gone all around the houses for this.
I know. Did that for about 6 months. Then I downloaded Ableton. It just worked for me. The workflow was fine. The built-in effects and synths were incredible compared to the others that I'd used. I've been using it now for probably 8-9 years. When I was learning sound design and how to use the DAW, all the tutorials online seems to be using Ableton. So I thought this works well. And back when I was collaborating as well, most of the people I collaborated with also used Ableton. So it was just easy to upload the project to the cloud and re-download it and collaborate that way.
What about favorite plugins or VSTs that you use? Because I know that I have some go-tos. Like, is there anything that you keep going back to in Ableton?
Third-party VSTs go synth-wise. I really like FM8, and I like Serum and Massive X. I also like regular Massive, but Massive X I just think has a bit more control over it. And then Ableton's Operator is actually where I made most of the synths for Cloudpunk, especially those really low-end, as you said, crunchy, rumbly ones. They were all done in Operator, and the quite piercing cut-through synths. And then as for effects, I basically only use Ableton's built-in effects.
Wow. I mean, it's a pretty deep rabbit hole. When you start getting into third-party VSTs, you can easily get lost.
When it comes to the orchestral side, I use Albion, Spitfire's Albion.1.
Oh, yes.
Really, really good, really detailed. I have a few others from them as well, but I seem to find myself always going back to Albion.1, even though it's quite an old library now. But no, I do have some of their other stuff, which is also fantastic, but I don't know, I'm just always drawn back to Albion.1.
So what about hardware side of things? What's your favorite hardware, or what keyboards do you tend to rely on?
So I use the Native Inference Complete Control S61 keyboard, just as my standard MIDI keyboard, which is really good for controlling contact and stuff, just with the interface. And then I've got a Korg Minilog analog synthesizer, which I make mostly pads on. It's really nice warm sound. You'll hear a lot of that in the Novalis soundtrack. And then I've got a Novation Mini Nova, which was actually my first synthesizer when I first decided to get into hardware synths. And yeah, I do like it, but since I've had the Korg, it's kind of taken a bit of a back seat, really. But I've really heavily been getting into outboard, especially analog synthesis, only sort of for the past year or so. But I can feel the addiction already. Like, I already want my next one. I just quite fascinated by analog synths and how warm and dusty they sound. Dusty in a nice way, though. For the monitors, I used ARK Rocket 8s. I've kind of flip-flopped between those and the Yamahas, but I've settled on these because I use them more and my ear just is attuned to them. Focusrite as the sound card. Can't go wrong with them. It's the S8i6, I believe. Okay. So let me have a look. Yeah, 8i6, so I can keep all my synths plugged into it without having to change them around all the time. And then microphone-wise, at the moment, I only have a Zoom H5, which is what I'm speaking to you on now. Perfect for what I need. I can take it out if I want to go do field recordings. It's very compact. I'll show you it, actually. Oh, it's stuck. There it is. It's really good, really crisp, really good for recording up-close sounds, and then also field recording. And that, at the moment, is about it. But yeah, that's the hardware setup. And then computer, I'm just using an iMac.
Can you remember the first album you bought?
Yeah, so the first, well, it was a CD that I bought with my own money, was Unshamedly Busted CD. Back in the day, I loved it. And I thought I was, I know, but pop punk or whatever it is. I thought I just felt incredible buying this physical disc with my own money that I'd saved up. And then, again, I got quite hooked in the sense of wanting to collect stuff. And I went from CDs, and now I collect vinyls. And the first vinyl I got was a first edition copy of Dark Side of the Moon, which, I love it. I cherish it. Pink Floyd, just a fantastic album, obviously. And then it's kind of progressed, got quite a few bits of reggae on there, drum and bass. I suppose my musical interests kind of have changed a lot. When I first got into electronic music, it was actually dubstep more than drum and bass. The kind of minimal, like Mahler or Biome. Slow, deep, rumbling sub basses and the crisp percussion, which again I can hear the influence in the scores with the cinematic big deep rumbles. And now I'm just kind of focused on drum and bass. So that went off on a bit of a tangent, didn't it? There, going from
no. I mean, it's good. We're all a product of our influences. We all come up with a sound that's subconsciously everything that we've listened to coming up to this part. So
So when I start making a piece, whether it be cinematic or bass, I don't really have an idea in mind. I just tend to start playing with drum samples, creating a drum loop, and then from there just see what kind of synths I can work into it. And then it just eventually turns into a full track. But I never sit down and think I want to make this or that. Unless it's obviously an assignment given to me where they say we've got the theme in the game, this is what we need, then it's a bit different. But if it's my personal music, I don't think there's much point in planning because it never goes to plan anyway.
I mean, the thing that you start with and the thing that you finish with are two, unrecognizable, pieces anyway. When I do a personal project and I do something that I like, it's almost more of a hindrance because I feel like I have to see it through then. I feel like I have to ride that wave and carry on with that composition. I can't tear myself away from the keyboard until I have something that I'm satisfied with. But the problem is that everything else gets pushed to the side. Well, I mean, how do you deal with that?
I understand. I get that as well. When I'm really into the zone with a personal piece, and then I get a message saying, right, we need a score, it's very hard for me to just stop and come away from it. But I don't know, I think I've just learned that the passion is a hobby, whereas the scoring is a job. So I need to get that done. I just sort of say, Harry, stop, put this on hold. And often that works because then I'll stop it for a couple of days, come back to it and have fresh ideas, and then it goes even further to the next level.
How do you divide the time then between your personal music project and paying the bills with your, the music compositions and the gigs that you get?
Luckily for me, I really, really enjoy scoring as much, if not sometimes more than I do just producing drum and bass. So if I've got work on, that's fine. Do that before I do any personal stuff and not really feel too bad. As long as I've created something, I feel quite good about myself. Because I'm a freelancer, when the work is a little bit less, I'll then say do half the day composing, send it all off for feedback, and when I'm waiting for feedback, I'll get into producing my own stuff. But I don't really sit and think how I want to split it up. I just kind of take it as it comes, really.
If the music side took off, would you consider switching careers, I guess, to be a recording artist rather than a composer, or would you stay with the parallel gigs?
That's actually a tough question. I think I would like to do both because I like to see people play the games when my music's in and comment saying, the sound design's really good here, or the music's moving me. That's a very good feeling to have. But then at the same time, the freedom that you get with creating your own music, production is, that's unparalleled, really. So I think I'd probably follow that down, but make the cinematic kind of drum and bass like Polar and Bryson. Current sound. These kinds of people, because I do love scoring a lot.
So, influences. Do you ever approach a musical score with wanting to drop in motifs or, kind of sequences or things like that?
I do, and there are some in Novalis that I can tell you.
Cool.
Well, can't tell you now, but once it's released, I think you'll hear it. So there are a few synth patches that I designed in discussion with Marco, which is quite Blade Runner-ish, more in City of Ghosts than Cloudpunk. But other than that, we just wanted to do something quite in its own box, quite unique, I suppose.
When you come up with a cyberpunk-influenced game that has already a set of genres and influences that you can't really avoid, I mean, you couldn't really have too many styles of music that would suit that Blade Runner Fifth Element kind of landscape. So it definitely wears its influences on it, like visible on its sleeve.
Yeah, definitely. It's a genre which is unique in itself, and it is quite hard to stray away from or create something completely new. Everything's so recognizable. So here's something and go, that is Synthwave. Without me knowing where it's from, where it's come from, I know that's a Cyberpunk store, for example.
What was big influences for you when you were doing your Synthwave homework, I guess, when you were coming up to compose Cloudpunk?
With the more Synthwave songs, people such as Resonance, and Gunship. I listen to them quite heavily before composing the score because they tend to be quite melodic synthwave with kind of a modern twist, whereas people such as Resonance are quite, they go for the very old sounding, very retro, whereas we wanted more of a blend of newer sounds, but you could tell it's synthwave.
So off the top of your head, if there is one music creation tip or trick or hack that you have that always seems to work or that you rely on a lot for your composition?
Yeah, that's another big question. I suppose 2 tips. One that's more not as technical is you got to allow yourself to make mistakes. Whereas when I first start composing a song, I sometimes sit down and I start and then I'm like, how is this ever going to turn into a song? So you got to allow yourself time and don't think about where it's going. Just do each little bit and you'll see it just gradually turn into a full song. But for me, that was the hardest thing to get over, was starting and then trying to think, right, where is this going next? What chord am I going to use next? Blah, blah, blah. It's try and, I know it sounds cliche, but feel it more than think about it. And then as for technical tips, compression, to be honest, I really like multiband compression on things like synths. The higher end, big pitch synths, high frequency synths, if they're compressed enough, they can really, really cut through a mix without sounding harsh and tinny. They'll sound full, still, and alive. And then mono basses as well, which is something that when I've been showing people what to do, they didn't realize that subs should be in mono. They've tried to make them as wide as they can in the mix because they thought, oh, well, that'll translate to a big sounding sub. But no, those 2, multiband compression on highs, always put your lows in mono. It's basically, that works for me. That's what I go through. That's my rule of thumb, really.
That's good to know. That's very good tips. I know from my experiences, I tend to get stuck in that 8-bar loop thing where you come up with a killer idea that's the middle of the song or something. Do you have any tips for breaking out of that 8-bar loop and extending that into a song?
I do. So if you've got an 8-bar loop, which you really like the sound of, but you don't know how to translate that to an introduction, quite an easy thing to do is if you've got the tonal melodic piece, whether it's a synth or a piano, if you drench that in reverb, record the reverb tail, just the tail of it, put that at the start and turn that into like an ambient loop. That very quickly, that already sets the scene for what it's going to sound like. And then you start adding percussion, maybe some little motifs on top of that. And then you build it up and then drop in the main part of the song after that. So did that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
that's genius.
Yeah, so if you've got that, just the tail of the reverb, it already has all the tones coming from music. So I just loop that and then it creates kind of like a pad almost. And you know that, okay, this is the tone that the song is in, this is the key. And then for me, creativity starts around that. And then often by the time I've built it up, I just mute or delete that reverb tail because I don't need it anymore. It just sounds muddy. But that would be that's how I tend to get out of being stuck in a loop.
Genius. I like it. I'm stealing that for sure. Moving forward, what would you consider to be your dream contract or gig or offer?
I think I would really like to score either a big film such as Dune, Interstellar, something massive and sci-fi, or the same kind of scale but in a game. That's pretty much what I'm aiming for. Something in the sci-fi genre, because I think you can get so many different ideas, whether it be like alien sounds in the music or just big, really wide cinematic tension themes, right down to the very delicate, like trying to, I don't know, dock the spaceship or take off your mask and it's like, oh, quite tense and zoned in, but delicate. Whilst I do appreciate them, like John Williams, Star Wars, I really, really like the scores, but for me, I don't really like composing that style. I much prefer the big, like, quite brash and harsh, like seat-shaking scores, really.
And I guess lastly, publicize yourself. Where can we find you?
At the moment, you found me through my Twitter. That's where most people seem to find me. So there's that, or there's my Facebook page as well. Either one of those two, I'm always open to messages. Send me a message. I might not reply instantly. I'm quite hectic, but I will definitely get back to you, or just my email, and I will do my SoundCloud as well.
Very nice. Well, it's been a pleasure, and I appreciate taking the time out. This is a relatively new thing for me as well, so hopefully every time I play a game, I'll try and get people involved and
really
hear more about the game. Yeah, I think so. It just gives a bit more depth and meaning to the gameplay rather than just popping from game to game. So yeah, I appreciate you taking out the time.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for getting in contact.